This is a global coronavirus check-in that we're going to be doing 3 times a week at 11 o'clock a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And the intention of it is to just help balance our global mental health. This is the inaugural run of it. We will be doing it every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday for the foreseeable future. And today I've invited a bunch of my closer friends to join me in this, and we'll talk about how we go forward after we have a few more people online. But the idea is to give people a chance to tell their stories and talk about what their fears and anxieties are, and also just to support the mental health community, because all the therapists I know are just overwhelmed with people who want to talk to them now in this unique lockdown that we're having around the world. And so let's see. Yeah, John, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm very appreciative of that. Can you say something, John? So you're currently muted, but let me unmute you.
Yeah, I just got the sound turned on, so it's working now.
Okay, great. All right. So we got this started, and I'm working on bringing people onto the panel here. So Tim, I wonder if you could talk about what our thinking is on this as we get going.
Sure. My overall frustration with kind of the capacity of our culture is we're really good at supporting each other in terms of kind of commercial success, social standing, materialism. You know, we're a capitalist society, and we're really good at those principles and those values. But what we're not very good at is supporting each other emotionally, dealing with negative feelings, doubt, any kind of sort of a spiritual difficulty is really hard to address in our culture, even in the areas where usually you would expect there's a sort of an openness to those kinds of issues, like in the church. Oftentimes there's not very much openness to the kinds of difficulties that we all encounter in terms of just the unfriendliness, the personal unfriendliness of the culture at large. So in a crisis like this, all of these issues come up. We're all sequestered at home. We all have to deal with the fact that we are, as individuals, you know, don't really fit in very well. I don't know how many people feel like they just really fit into this culture, but I imagine it's a pretty small slice. That most of us feel like we are personally inadequate. We don't really have a solid community of people that can listen to our troubles and our worries. And with the coming of the virus, it seems like a very unique kind of problem, especially for our culture, in that it forces us to realize that our health really depends on the health of the people around us, that we can't just buy our way into the select group, that we can't just impress people and move forward into a kind of elite, as so often happens in the outer culture. usually we depend on our professional standing, our material advantages like being wealthy or having access to something like the academic world. You know, we can depend on our degree or our social standing to gain a sort of foothold in the social hierarchy. And the fact is, we are all individual human beings. We all are emotional creatures who are longing to be held, to be recognized for who we are. And there's really not very much listening in that regard in terms of the dominant culture. As Skip mentioned in the sort of the written introduction to this, our professional psychotherapists and the clergy, everybody who's in a professional realm of listening to troubles, to personal troubles, they're being overwhelmed. And so this group is really a chance for us to just to talk to each other and to support each other in a time that is really, really a frightening new kind of problem that we haven't faced before. I was laying awake all night thinking about things like, for instance, I wonder if we have seen the last of crowds. We know scientific evidence today that we never knew in the last outbreak, like for instance, 100 years ago in the 1918 flu epidemic. There's a lot of public understanding of science that was not shared at that time. And one of the things we recognize about this particular virus is that it mutates. And already, I guess there's two versions of it. So if you've gone through if you've contracted the virus and have survived it, that doesn't protect you from the next version. So it could be that next winter you get hit by the second version, even though you have immunity to the first. We all understand these things. So is it possible in the future that there's going to be crowds? I just don't know. I wonder if we haven't built the last of our big stadiums. I can't imagine that a year from now or 10 years from now, there are going to be a great number of people that would flock to a huge outdoor concert or a big sporting event. There's going to be a certain number of people who are going to say, I know that virus is mutatable and that people are contagious and that we have a vaccine maybe for the coronavirus that we dealt with in 2020, but we don't have a vaccine for the mutant variety that is going to spread next. That's going to be the next big killer. All of these things to me we're faced with all of this now. I live in Montana, which is a really clean part of the world. We didn't get our first case until 2 weeks ago. We didn't get our first death until yesterday. So compared to a place like New York, it feels like, oh, this is paradise. But we are all going to be faced with this. There's not a person in the world who is not endangered. And of course, I think about the people in the undiscovered tribes in like the Amazonian jungle. So far, I think they're going to be safe for quite a while, but all it takes is one idiot, dropping a Coke bottle out the window, like we saw in that great movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, throwing a Coke bottle out the window. And, the virus can last for several days on a shiny surface. Well, that falls into the forest somewhere. Some poor, unfortunate guy from an undiscovered tribe picks up this bottle and the coronavirus is in their tribe now. So there's not anybody who is protected from this anywhere in the world. We all are on the same team. We are all going to suffer from this. There's not one of us who is really protected. I have a friend in Brazil who was infected and has gone through the quarantine and has survived. And so she has immunity. And she's the first person I know that is now immune to the coronavirus. But that's only one version. So of course, the second version comes along and she's going to be just as vulnerable as everybody else. So we are really living in a new moment in history. We have to depend on each other. We have to reach out. We have to know that our community is, well, like this one, for instance, is people all over the world. Nick is in Singapore. Miles is in Canada. Most of us are in the US, but Jess is in Hawaii. People all over the world can gather together in a little virtual community like this and give each other support. And that is really critical. That's what this group is about. How can we reach out to each other, listen to each other's particular problems, and try to support each other? I am an artist. I have been, for me, this is not a big deal. I've been self-sequestered for 12 years, partly because as an artist, I really don't fit into the culture. And that's always been troubling to me. And I'm also kind of a mystic. I live alone. I work alone day after day after day, year after year, trying to intuit the truth out of the air around me, the ether. My antennae are out. I don't know who it was that said that artists are the antenna of the culture. I'm picking up signals all the time of distress and fear and loneliness that are bigger than just myself. They are coming to me from the collective unconscious. And it's my job to bring those into reality, to give them expression. But it's also partly my job to reach out to people who are feeling frustrated and alone and isolated and say, we're all on the same team. We are all in this together. We are here to support each other, regardless of who you are. We are gathered here together to hear each other's stories, to reach out and affirm the dignity of every person, regardless of who you are, regardless of what your circumstances are. Every human emotion and response and fear is worthy of our attention.
Right. So before I start to go around the room and ask others for their experiences, I just want to ask John Jackson to speak for a moment, because he's a retired psychiatrist, and he might be able to give us some insight into how, what we're doing here and what he's experiencing in California and so on. So John, would you mind giving us a couple of words here?
Well, I can speak for myself. I really like what you said, Tim, about how in our culture we're really good with the capitalist values, you called them, the rational, but we're not good with emotion, feeling, doubt, difficulties. I find that's true even in the listening profession. People have difficulty really listening to difficult material. So it's hard to find support. I have never fit in my entire life. My feeling is I'm not from here. I don't think that means personally inadequate necessarily. I think it means I'm different. I think differently. I feel differently. I have a different set of values than most people do. Where that comes from, partly from growing up in Hawaii with my feet on the soil, you know, the Aina. But mixing that with, you know, not so much American Western culture, but European Western culture. I don't know. I live in California now. I'm such an introvert that, like you, Tim, this isn't all that different than my normal way of life. I mean, yeah, it's strange to not be able to go to the store, to need to wear gloves and go through all these precautions. But this isn't such a dramatic shift for me and my girlfriend too. You know, she lives in Santa Rosa, I'm in Sebastopol. So we go back and forth to each other's homes, but we don't see other people really at all, with rare exceptions, during this period of time. That's a good question to ask about crowds. And it's one question that points to, you know, our future has changed. It's not going to be the same. And certainly for the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to be dramatic. We'll see what happens after that. And we have to be ready for that. Maybe even anticipate it and look forward to it, because we've needed some change in this culture, and need to be a part of that. I'm not sure about what you said about the virus. It does mutate. It's an RNA virus, which means every time it replicates, it makes faulty copies. I haven't heard yet. What I hear is that there's a protein on the virus that's been pretty consistent from one version of it to the next. If we can target that protein, we'll probably be able to find a vaccine or an immunity. But truth is, that's the problem with the HIV virus. It mutates so easily, so frequently, and the protein mutates. We can't come up with a virus for it, because we get a virus, there's 12 other versions of it now. That's what happened historically with that one. So is that going to happen now with the coronavirus? We're going to have to wait and see. I was just listening to Fauci this morning saying that there will probably be a second wave next year this time, but we'll be better prepared. We'll have better immunity. We'll know better what to do about it, et cetera, et cetera. That's another time, and that's in the future. But right now, yeah, this is a big change, and we're suddenly facing something we've never, ever gone through before in our experience, which is going to dramatically change everything, our lives, the world, culture. How's that?
That's good. So one of the things that I want to emphasize here is a couple of lines of a poem that Dr. Jung used to like to refer to, which is that, when there's a trauma, there's a rescuing power within us. And this is a poem called Patmos by Friedrich Holderlin. And the 2 lines are, "Where danger is, grows also the rescuing power."
Mm-hmm.
And we can, whatever the danger is to us, and it's quite substantial to me and my immediate family, which is my wife and my mother-in-law, who's 90 years old. Whatever it is, there will be a future, but it may not be what we plan for. And I just want to point out that we're having this conference right now because of the Spanish flu in 1918. I beg your pardon? Because in 1918, my grandfather was engaged to a woman who, together with her 4 sisters, all died on the same weekend in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia was a city that held a parade like the Mardi Gras that was held in New Orleans a few weeks back. And as a result, 16,000 people died in Philadelphia alone. But the result of that parade and that mistake of not self-quarantining is that my grandfather married my grandmother, and so therefore I exist, and therefore Tim and I can be friends, and therefore we can have this conference today. So we can take courage that life will go on, but it may not be what we expect. But anyway, several of us already know each other and have had a session among the group, which we'll come back to that, but we have some new guests today. And so I just want to ask some of the new folks that are on this conference if they would speak about what their experiences are, how they're coping, how they're dealing with the situations that they're facing. So Melanie Berg, are you willing to speak about that? We'll have to unmute you. Yeah, oh, great.
I'm Melanie. I'm from Chicago. So again, like everyone else, this isn't really affecting me as of yet, as far as being isolated. I had a massive spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that, or it was like a Jungian awakening 3 years ago. So I have been like on this healing path and just trying to, basically I got hit with a lot of truth, and it caused my mind to, it threw me into a psychosis. So I've been trying to unravel that for 3 years, and I've been doing a really good job. And I was just coming out of that and getting back into society when this hit. So I'm grateful that you're having this chat. I watch your book readings a lot, and I was really excited to actually get to like talk to you guys. And the Young material has helped me deeply with unraveling what happened to me and what's going on with me currently. So with this new crisis, I'm just trying to like adjust to what this means, because I thought I was on a path back to like normalcy, but clearly that was not the plan. So that's just where I'm at. It's bothersome in Chicago. They've been keeping the numbers fairly down, but there's not a lot of people that are actually following the stay in place, especially people that are working. So just anticipating what's to come, it has been challenging. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Melanie. It's really helpful to hear for me what people are experiencing in other parts of the world. You know, it helps make the experience real when we can look at other people's lives. And so I just really appreciate hearing your story. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank Melanie too. What I was thinking was we have some habitual backup patterns that we can jump to under stress. And so we may think we're making progress, but that will tend to draw us back, and we can react, you know, like maybe we formerly did, since you've gone through you know, an awakening experience. And it is a journey of going back and forth between old patterns and new patterns, is the way I've found it to be. So just hang in there and try to recognize that those old patterns say, go away. Skip, you're muted. Skip,
Pete, I see you're on here. Pete is a friend of mine, used to be my neighbor in Helena. Do you want to say something about your condition? I can't hear you. You're muted. If you go to the bottom left corner, you can unmute yourself, I think.
I've got you unmuted now, Peter.
Try it again.
Peter, I have you unmuted now. You should be able to speak. Nope, not
No,
hearing
still
you.
can't hear you. Maybe it's a mic issue in your computer. I'm not sure.
Right.
Pete has a visual impairment, so it's really hard for him to see the screen.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So meanwhile, Dr. Joss Sangaling is in Hawaii, where it's 5:30 in the morning, and she agreed to listen in. I don't know if you want to talk about some of these issues, Joss. I know that it's early to ask you to say anything, but okay. Can't hear Joss, so she may be resting. Okay. Let's see, who shall we ask to speak? So Marie Teresa, I wonder if you'd talk about what's happening in your life and where you are and what you're facing with you and your family. Yeah. Yep.
Hello everyone, my name is Marie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I'm here in California, Los Angeles, and right now the mayor is telling us to stay home, right, like the rest of the country. But I still see people, the freeway is still full, and I'm wondering where those people are going. So anyway, I think it will be interesting to share with you that I work 2 jobs. One is I'm a software developer, and being a programmer, I am used to this being alone, being inside my mind. So this coronavirus pandemic is not. I'm not so much affected by it because I am really a loner. But when I go out, I'm extrovert too. And I also take care, I'm a caregiver. So I take care of seniors. And there has been a bigger demand right now because some of the caregivers over 60, they stop going to work because, they want to take care of themselves and protect themselves. So I'm the one covering for them. So those shifts that they left, I'm covering for them. So I will do like 4 hours here, 4 hours there. I cannot do the whole day because I have to, what do you call this? Divide my time so I can service as much client as possible. So I think as a caregiver, you don't do this for money. Actually, it is like a vocation that for to help people who are in need.
Thank you, Marie. And just for Peter, there's a note here on the YouTube channel that says, has Peter enabled his microphone access on Zoom? Sometimes
Yes.
Okay, there you are. We can hear you now. Terrific.
Yes.
Yeah, good job,
Operator
Peter.
error there. I apologize.
That's right.
So-
So tell us about you, Peter, and what you're facing right now.
Well, challenges, but nothing gravely different than other people. I come to this with a couple of different hats. The one hat that I think that is important to acknowledge is my own wrestling with mental health, or the lack thereof. I have been working with counselors and clergy for 30 years for various issues. But the other side of that is that I'm not a clinician by any imagination, but I have filled roles as a lay pastor and also a professional mediator. And people come to me to help settle conflict. And in this period of time, in the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, I haven't been available because I've been on lockdown because of my health issues. And it's interesting, you know, going back to some of the things that Tim alluded to in the beginning, this idea that we are a capitalistic society and we monetize everything. And I've been doing pro bono work for probably 15 years. And I'm not doing it because I'm not mentioning that to make it sound like I'm this saint. I'm not. I just, if anything else, I do this pro bono work for my own mental health. So I'm engaged with others and, you know, being a part of this thing we call society. And so when I saw this invitation, I didn't realize it was this big of a forum. So I'm very thrilled with that. But it's kind of humbling to be a part of this because I'm just one person here in Helena, Montana, around the block from Tim, obviously. And so it's interesting to look at this because I have family scattered all over the place. I have family back in New York. I have family down in New Orleans. I have family over in Long Beach, California. And those are all places that are really hit. And here we are in, you know, Montana, where there's, you know, maybe 1 million people in the entire state, but we're scared. I have a 17-year-old daughter in the other room who hasn't been to school in 3 weeks.
Right.
And how do we, as parents still, you know, communicate the significance of what this is to a 17-year-old who is supposed to be being excited about what's next after graduation? What, you know, I have a 26-year-old son over in Belgrade and Bozeman. And 7 months ago, he finally got his first professional job. And his professional job is that of the music industry. And all of a sudden, everything's closed down.
Yeah.
And so how do I be available to them, you know, saying, hey, this is history, you know, unfolding around you. What are you going to do to, you know, be a good citizen, not try to monetize things? And that's what it drives me crazy that we're being excited that there's a $1,200 payout coming, you know, to some folks. Whoop-dee-doo!
Yeah,
It's minimum wage for a month.
Yeah, that works out to $7 per capita in the United States.
Right.
And the total bailouts and Australia, meanwhile, has spent $1,200 per capita compared to our $7. So we have a ways to go yet.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling how much value is placed on a dollar as opposed to, you know, a human soul. And right. You know, that this role that I have as a part-time lay pastor, it doesn't equate. It doesn't rationalize. It doesn't do anything. And, you know, I've got people, you know, yelling at me, literally yelling at me, not like mad at me, but yelling because they're so terrified and angry. And I don't know what to tell them.
Right.
I mean, there is nothing I can say that can make sense of the irrational.
Yeah.
It's like arguing with a drunk.
It's an issue. I want to bring in Gray Yates because Gray is a biology teacher in Georgia, and he's facing his students, and he may not be able to stay with us that long. So, Gray, what's going on in Macon?
Yeah, we're actually on our scheduled spring break this week, so that this is a good time for me. I'm kind of I've taken 1 or 2 days to kind of respond. Our school let out 2 weeks ago. We're fortunate enough to have an online program already in place, and so we didn't miss an instructional day. We had 2 or 3 days where we got to explain to the students how we were going to move online. We're slowly adapting that as we go, so that's been a positive. As far as the virus goes, I'm about 80 miles south of Atlanta, which is one of the bigger hubs, the big hub in Georgia. You know, once you get out of Atlanta, Georgia wise, you know, you're so spread out kind of in general. People live very spread out here. And so, and I think a lot of people in the smaller towns, especially Macon in general, have just kind of moved back to their homes. Now again, so that for a town like Macon, the bigger question is how long can, you know, a relatively poorer, not wealthy community kind of sustain itself without, you know, like y'all have been talking about, playing the capitalist game, you know, continuously. So that's where we are in Macon. You know, kind of my thoughts, and it's along the lines of kind of some of the things that y'all have been talking about, is how are we going to project this change into the future? Kind of what is education going to look like? How are we gonna get kids the information they need, the play that they need, the interaction they need with others? What are the environments we're going to be able to create? I'm teaching ecology right now, a course in ecology. I teach biology and ecology, teach 1 or 2 other things too, but there's a lot of conversation in ecology that's so good, and biology as well, about the environment, and, you know, the fact that, you know, to think in an ecological or an ecological mind, the organism and the environment are the same thing. And so, you know, we are adaptive creatures, you know, and one of my things in this wisdom path thing that I would like to give people is, or to encourage people on, is that, you know, by our nature, even though we blind ourselves to it a lot, by our nature, we are adaptive creatures. I was talking to friends who are next door, and that was, you know, as we did yard work in different times, but we just talked about how easily that it has been, that we just adapted to this new way very quickly. And so, you know, if there is anybody who is not adapting, you know, that's kind of what we want to be here for, is to talk to you as you learn to adjust to some sort of new environment that is changing very rapidly. So that's kind of where my mind is. But you know, as far as how Georgia's responding, I think, you know, there are, like everywhere, there are pockets who are doing very well. There are pockets that aren't. Macon seems to be doing fairly well, getting the people tested that need tested, and, you know, kind of keeping everything at a minimum spread. So hopefully that continues.
Thank you, Gray. I want to be sensitive to the time zone people are in, so I'm going to call on Nick Chan now, who's in Singapore, because it's quite late there, and ask Nick to tell us something about what's going on in Singapore.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, just want to say hello, and I'm really glad to be part of this. And that was a very that was a really nice intro by Tim quite a bit ago. The part where he said about the long-term effects of this, and how people might, even when this is over, people might actually think twice about going to big venues. I didn't actually consider that, but yeah, given the mutation and just, you know, the fear that this might imprint in a lot of people, yeah, I think that was very yeah. But anyway, about Singapore, like I was telling the panel earlier this morning, for me, the government here is pretty good, and our population it's about 6 million, which is a lot of people for a small space, but it's quite organized here and we've got it under control. So from what I see, people are okay. You know, the mood and the air seems, yeah, people are still, you know, going about doing their things. There is the social distancing, but I don't feel it's anything really extreme. Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear. So Khushbu Kataria approached me last night, and she's in India, I believe. And so, can you join us, Khushbu? Even if you don't want to give your video, you could at least tell us what
Hi.
you're experiencing in India. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. Well, they're just here saying hello. That's Phoebe and Bliss. Okay. So, situation is not good here. The situation is not good here. People are yeah, so actually, like it's quite stupidity might kill India. Like everything else is fine. It's just stupidity we are dealing with. Being honest, the way I understand it. So the day, like our first kind of a demo round, when like they were teaching us how to do it, and they said like come out and 5 o'clock and clap and everything, but they came out, and they came out with drums, and like it was so they came out like with drums and with bands, and everybody's on the road railing, celebrate, like, and it's not a joke.
No, it's not.
A joke.
That's my shadow.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, we are in a grim situation. Stupidity is gonna kill India, and yeah, that's and the most saddest thing, like which we are seeing here is that, like, India is a very big country, and then there are few metro cities, like 5-6 metro cities, and their towns. So a lot of people come, like who live in like extreme situations, but to feed their families back in their villages and natives and things like that. So when the lockdown happened, when it started, so people, like, how do I explain? So there were certain, like really people who are working on like very low level jobs. Pardon my primitive English, but they suddenly had no, like, daily laborers basically, so they had no income or anything. So, and all the transportation is locked, so it so lot of national highways looks like that people are on some great on a journey. So it's like thousands and millions of people are on the road walking back home.
Right. So Khushbu, where are you in India? I've made 44 trips there since 1994.
Bangalore. I'm in Bangalore.
Okay. Well, I started a medical transcription company in Bangalore. In fact, 4 of them in earlier years. I was the first mover.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Khushbu, I have a question.
Please tell me.
Does the Indian government provide any sort of support for the people of India?
No, they just announced it, and yeah, nothing. It just, like, from today, I think it's 6th day. So they're starting to they're starting to give food to people, but they had no planning. So everything is running on the like like on the shoulders of people who are conscious enough to tell other and help others. So for an example, like just today morning, like I went outside to buy milk, like after 6-7 days, and there were like people gathered over there, and they were having cigarettes, and it was going. So I shouted on like 20 people, and I'm like, stay away from each other. You will not get, your family will not get your body. You have to understand that. And I said that. I said that you won't be able to decide that you will be burnt or you will be buried. Come on. So I had to say that, and
Yeah.
then all they understood, and I was like, sorry, Didi, and but yeah, that is how it is going. Like people, like we have to handle each other. That is what I think maybe a right word. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's no government support. If you see footages, it's like, yeah, like millions of people are just walking from one state to another state, and it it is actually a reminder. Actually, I see it as a pattern of something, because this is second time in India which is happening when people are migrating. Another one before this was the partition, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh partition, when people just walked, and at that time also it was poor people who walked from one state to another state, and half of them had died. So in our case also the people who are dying, like from coronavirus, the people who are migrating from one place to another, that number is higher. So the casualty which is created because of the situation is the higher than the actual situation. So
So, Kushbu, how are you holding yourself together in the meantime? How are you coping?
I have, like, I don't have anxiety for right now. It's like I am happily quarantined. Let everybody be quarantined, and I'm into that. God, listen to this. I so, so yeah, my I have a beautiful garden, and I'm seeing new kind of birds and new kind of butterflies. Like today I saw like a big red and black moth, and it was like, oh my God, I'm like, this is colors in my existence, colors of life in my
Right.
existence. Like, and so till the time everything is quarantined, I am fine. I have enough money also for at least 2 months, but I don't have a job. So in 2 months, I have to figure it out something. I was supposed to like join a Thailand-based company this week, and well, but we are quarantined. It's God's wish, and I don't go against God.
Right.
So so there's a bit of anxiety, but for now I am safe. For now I am safe. God bless.
Thank God for that. Kushbu, I hope you'll mention these sessions to others in India, because
Yeah.
we'll be doing this 3 times a week. And
Yeah.
if we want to find everyone's story and talk to everyone about how they're doing, and certainly you're welcome to be here every time also, because we want to, the key thing for all of us is going to be maintaining our mental balance. And
Yeah.
I know I personally am in the risk group because I'm 73 years old and have
Yeah.
had asthma all my life, and not a very bad asthma anymore, but still it's a risk factor. And so,
And you were coughing the other day.
yeah, I was
Yesterday
coughing
you
the
were
other
coughing.
day. That's right. I was coughing because I have allergies, which may be my saving, that may be my saving factor, because I take allergy shots every 2 weeks. I had them yesterday. And
Okay.
the way allergy shots work is it beefs up your immune system. And so I may be able to fight it off better than most people because I do have allergies. That may be the saving grace. And so you hear my voice is a little gravelly right now because all of our
Yeah.
trees are popping open right now. So we have lots of pollen around. But no, we're fine at the moment. You know, the three of us in our household are fine, but we're not looking forward to being in quarantine for 18 months. So
Yeah.
we'll keep this going to help people around the world cope with what's happening, because it's a mental balancing activity. So I want to go to Chris Newton. Thank you, Khushbu. And if you want to make any other comments as others talk, please feel free to speak up. You just have to unmute your mic when you do it, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Namaste. Thank you.
Yeah, namaste. So Chris Newton, tell us about you and what is happening in your life. Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm in Leeds in the UK, and so the situation here is relatively calm at the minute. So what's happened is my college in Manchester has closed until September now because of all this, and so we're all challenged to like find our ways like at home. So all the teaching for the course, the music course, is gone online. So I'm having like online lessons with my teacher and everything. So it's not much in comparison to what the college is, but yeah, we're all trying to figure it out at home. So one of the things that sort of helped, keep my day-to-day going is just trying to find ways to be creative, because for me that's a real sort of a good way to how do you say, well, not get bored, essentially. It's a good cure to that. So what I do is basically each weekend go through all the hours of my week and plan out what I'm going to be doing in each of them, and trying to keep sort of as loose a timetable as possible, but with the most sort of able to make the most progress and able to be creative within it, and that seems to be working at the minute.
Great. Go ahead, Tim. You're muted at the moment. There you go.
Well, again, I'm just so appreciative of you guys giving us a glimpse of what life is like for you. It's just really helpful for me to hear what it feels like on the ground. And actually, Chris, trying to find ways to stay creative. That's one of the ways that human beings crave to stay human. And I think I wouldn't have thought of that. Here I am, an artist, and I just didn't think about that because it's so endemic to my lifestyle. But as you say, that's really one of the things that helps us keep grounded and keep alive in a moment of crisis.
I think Nietzsche said something along the lines of creation being the great redeemer from suffering. I think it's the spoke Zarathustra or something. But it's a really interesting idea that by us kind of, I don't know, escaping through the medium of creativity, we can overcome so much. Like, for example, I do all sorts of things. I play violin, I play piano, I compose, do artwork, and all of them are sort of ways that I can escape through, I don't know, a relationship with beauty, with creativity, this kind of thing. There's a really interesting documentary by Roger Scruton about why beauty matters, and it's about sort of how we're losing our relationship with it, with beauty, and how beauty enables people all throughout the past to enable us to, I don't know, find an escape from suffering from day to day.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Chris. I think that you mentioned Roger Scruton, which you might do an internet search if you're interested, because he does have, I really like him. So it's a,
Yeah, we all suffer throughout our lives for one thing or another. That's the Buddhists say that's one of the four things you can count on. Birth, death, suffering, and karma. Those are the four big ones. And we're problem-solving creatures. And so that means that when we're growing up, as you're just finishing your growing up years, we're just learning how to be a human being. We start as wild animals as an infant, and we have to learn from our parents how to be human beings, and from our teachers what the rules are and so on. But then when we get up to your age, then we find out, oh yeah, we have to solve problems all day, every day. I mean, we all solve 100 problems a day, and you know, we don't think about it. I mean, there are bio breaks, and there's eating our meals and finding something to eat, and all those things are problems that we have to deal with. And what maturity is getting more and more consciousness of how we can deal with our problems. And that's you know, the essence of what I try to do in terms of offering this YouTube channel. But you know, it's not easy. It's often not easy, and we have to know that we can turn to people. Do you have family close by, Nick or Chris?
Yeah, I'm living with my my parents at the minute. I've come home, so yeah, it's really nice to spend time with family.
Yeah,
and yeah, just trying to be at peace.
right.
Because we're all on top of each other. That's the thing. Because it's a relatively small house, so we're trying to like figure out how we can all get on with our daily lives like together.
Right.
Yeah, when everybody has to work and everything. But yeah, it's quite fun.
new kinds of problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's hear from Nancy. Nancy, do you want to offer some wisdom here?
Well, I wanted to share a poem that I wrote that is very brief, but was my feeling at the time on one day. So it goes, a humming tree, streamlets of bees flowing through the plum blossoms, thrusting back the dread of death, COVID-19, and a world gone mad. So that's kind of been my back and forth, is the beauty in this world, the beauty of people we love, the joy of the birds singing, and then that sense of dread and sense of sadness for those that are affected much more than I am. So it's kind of a back and forth on that. I think when I was in front of that little tree with its humming bees, it just arrested me. I think because life is so simple these days. And so I just stood there for a while. I was on a walk, but I just stood there and enjoyed that. And I think there are moments in all of our days where there's just something we enjoy. And if we can stop and drink it in for a while, let our soul fill with that joy, I think that's one way to keep sane in these moments.
You know, we have to stay in the moment, that's for sure. And you know, as I'm thinking about Khushbu and India, for example, it so happens that I have probably thousands of Indian friends because over a 25-year period, I created 40 production centers in India that employ over 6,000 people. And I was the first mover in an industry that employs about 250,000 people in total. And so I've had a lot of experience all over India. And you know, I'm just, you know, if I think about what the future of this virus is going to be in India, it's just really frightening. And so, you know, it's so I can't even think about it. If I think about it, I'm going to collapse in a puddle. So, and that's true of friends in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, many other countries where I've spent a lot of time. And so I'm just very worried about other people in the world. I mean, we in the United States think that, you know, we have it bad and things are bad, but, you know, yes, things are bad, but they're, the future in other countries is going to be even worse. So, you know, we have to think about how we can contribute. This is what I can do now. Because at my age, I have 2 joint replacements, so I'm not going to be running around the world doing what I did in the old days. But anyway, so Penelope joined us. Penelope is from London and has been a friend of mine for a couple of years. Penelope, are you prepared to say something about what's going on in the UK?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. I can talk. It's been very rough here, and we've been on a lockdown. I think a bit longer than some places in the USA. I've basically myself. I have had this virus. It started on the 10th, and I'm towards the end of it. It's been extremely frightening. Being to self-isolate with it, and the NHS are not set up to really help. They're just giving 2 symptoms, but there are a lot more symptoms. And in my research, the symptoms are becoming clearer of what they are. There's more than 2 because so I think that as we go, it's an unknown. And I do think that being quite fit and healthy at 53, being quite fit and healthy and very high in my nutrition and supplements, it shocked me that I've been this unwell for 3 weeks. And that I've had to take care of myself and there is nowhere to go. So I think for people, and also I'm very grateful that the last couple of years prior to meeting you, Skip, that I did a lot of intense work on complex PTSD on my early trauma, which means now that I'm not in the state I would have been a few years ago, which would have made this, I think, far more tragic to be healing CPTSD or PTSD and having this at the same time. So, have I lost you?
No, you didn't lose me. I had myself on mute. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, it's just humbling to hear from somebody who actually has the virus, and I'm glad you're up and like talking.
Yeah. Grateful. I'm very I feel very humbled by this. I'm very grateful for just being here. It's changed me. Something's changed in me. Yeah.
I think it's also good for us to hear that, you know, you're in pretty good shape, and that I'm sure is very helpful, but it's not a get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
I want to say something about what Penelope said, that, you know, the way she's pre-worked a lot of her PTSD, you know, the grief work around that. People are right now we're all dealing with the work we haven't done. So I like hearing that. That's good news, Penelope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Penelope, what part of London are you in?
I'm currently in a place called by Ealing. I was in Hampstead for 12 years and I moved here in November, but this is not my permanent slot. I actually did have a ticket to fly to LA today, but clearly I'm not going.
Oh.
It's on hold.
You didn't say Ely, did you?
Ealing Broadway. It's called Ealing Broadway. Yeah. It's okay. It's not a choice. It's just was a turn of events, and I didn't intend to stay here anyway. I want to fly over to the USA. I need the expansion of the whole of the states, the Arizona and the Milky Way, and I need to see some beauty the next 20 years of my life before I'm, you know, whatever whatever, next 20 years are vital to me to have some joy.
Yeah.
Yes, let's hear it for beauty. For heaven's
Right.
sake.
Yeah. There isn't much beauty around Ealing Broadway. I can tell you that.
Well, I think the only member of the group that we haven't heard from today is Miles. So Miles, are you there such that you can say something about what's happening in Canada? We have to get you unmuted. We lose Miles. Oh, there he is.
Sorry.
I have to go. So
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, John. I really appreciate it.
It's great being a part of this. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
John.
So go ahead, Miles.
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wow, we're talking to people all around the world. It's an amazing time that we live in. And so my name's Miles Flagg. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Calgary's the city and Alberta's the province, and Canada, of course, is the nation. So Canada consists of 10 provinces and 3 territories. The territories have more of a federal government oversight than provinces. And provinces in Canada are quite powerful insofar as the jurisdictions, the different aspects of government that they control. And whereas my understanding is in the United States, your 50 states, they're quite powerful, but I don't think they have as much of a jurisdiction oversight or purview as a province does. So provinces in Canada are sometimes fighting with each other to the point of people saying, we're going to separate. But separation raises its ugly head every once in a while. And if you're old enough, you might remember back in the 1970s, early 1972 it was, we had what was called the FLQ crisis. That was Fédération de Libération de Québec. So Quebec was at a point where the War Measures Act was actually invoked because there was like a plot to undermine the government in Quebec. So Quebec is a French-speaking province, and Canada is a sort of some sort of an experiment, you could say, where we're trying to keep people who speak French and English living together and in harmony, and it has its ups and downs. We are only 150 years old. Well, yeah, a little more than 150 years old now, formed in 1867. So why am I going into a history lesson? I guess just because there's definitely some very significant cultural differences between us and the United States. So we are only 1/10 of the size of the United States population-wise. California is a bigger economy than Canada.
Tokyo is a bigger economy than Canada.
Well, this is it. So, and I don't want to, do we're better than you guys or you're better than us. There's pros and cons of the way, like a professor, a course that I studied, a professor defined culture simply as the way things get done. Culture is the way things get done. So in Canada, we have a kind of a different way of getting things done. We are more socialist than the United States. But on the other hand, we don't have the free speech protections as strong as you do in the United States.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, whoa, wow, people, the way they talk about Trump, they don't mix any words. And I'm thinking, boy, I don't know. I'd be afraid to say some of these things because, or some of the things that I hear people saying, because you would think that you're going to get, arrested or charged with libel or slander, right?
Maya, can you give us an example? Because I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, so your freedom of speech is one of your amendments, right? What is it? The First Amendment?
Right. Yeah.
And from what I understand, for you to have that curtailed, it would require, you'd have to change the Constitution, and that would require a whole bunch of states to come together and say, yeah, okay, we're going to change that First Amendment. Whereas in Canada, we have a right to free speech too. But if I pulled out our Charter of Rights, which I have, it says that whereas Canada is formed under the principles of the supremacy of God and the rule of law, the rights that it goes on to talk about, like freedom of speech, they are only guaranteed insofar as is reasonable in a free and democratic society.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that, like, for example, we basically, from what I understand, our Prime Minister has invoked the War Measures Act, but it's now called the Emergency Measures Act. The Prime Minister has a lot of power in Canada, and I'm not an expert in comparative governance, but our Prime Minister can actually do stuff that maybe even exceeds what your president can do. So the War Measures Act was pulled out of the arsenal or the quiver of arrows that the Prime Minister has back in 1972. They've pulled it out basically now. And yeah, it's saying people, if you're working in a restaurant, the restaurant has to close except for takeout. No gatherings now more than 15 people, only essential workers. And I said last night, we've been in this situation for 10 days, but actually it's been even going on now more than 2 weeks. So possibly, hopefully, we've jumped on this a little bit faster than some of the other countries, and maybe we won't have quite as severe effects. And so far as flattening the curve of the growth of cases such that our healthcare isn't overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The healthcare is what we call single payer. I forget, there's another term that goes with it, but it's basically all of our healthcare is paid by taxation. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I will say that I see as a difference is we have friends in Wyoming, and we went and visited a few years ago, I guess now more like 10 years ago. And we noticed that, gosh, there's like people zipping around on motorcycles and they don't have helmets. Well, we've had helmet laws since, I don't know, I guess all my life. I can't remember seeing anybody in Canada riding a motorcycle or a all-terrain vehicle without a helmet. And so when you see that in Wyoming, it's like, ooh, wow, how is he getting away with that? We have laws that you have to, if you're a child, you have to be wearing a helmet on a bicycle. So let me just summarize, because I'm kind of rambling, but I think one of the differences is if you maybe can use this as a leverage, if you think that single payer healthcare open to all, covers all, is a good idea, then now's maybe the time to push for that down there in the United States. Because the reason we would not see people riding around without a helmet on their motorcycle is because we're all going to pay the bill for that person who falls off the motorcycle and gets a head injury.
Yeah.
So we're not, we're going to tell that person it's required that you wear a helmet. We're not going to have as much freedom because, hey, you get hurt, you're going to increase my taxes, kind of thing. So there's some differences culturally and maybe how we're handling things.
Right.
Thanks, Miles.
Thanks, Miles.
Carlos, are you there? We haven't heard from you yet today about Florida. Maybe he went off to get lunch.
Right. There he is.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, Carlos, tell us about Florida and what's going on there. It's concerning, the news I've been hearing from there.
Well, where I live in Florida, things are kind of tame, but in larger cities like Miami and Orlando and Tampa, I guess the situation is kind of similar to New York, maybe a little bit less dramatic since they have a smaller population. But there's a couple hundred, there's about 1,000 cases in Florida, I think. Honestly, things haven't been very different. I'm lucky to have a group of close friends and we get together just as much as we ever have. Other people, that might not be the case. I did hear the president's speech yesterday, and he talked about how depression around this time is probably going to skyrocket. And from what I can see, he's probably correct. I think that this group is pretty interesting. It's been nice to hear from everybody. I know that Tim and Skip put a tremendous amount of work into this. So thank you guys.
Carlos, it's Penelope here. I think also what I'm very aware of, which from my own trauma, where children are being left home, now having to stay home with parents, and what it bothers me greatly, where there is narcissism or sexual abuse going on in the home, that the children are not getting a reprieve that they need. And I think that as humanity, like to really, where we're sort of solved in ourselves, to really keep an eye on the neighbors or children where somehow that we've got our ears and our eyes open to any things that, are untoward going on. I really feel strongly about that subject myself. And I think addiction is another huge problem where I've seen, in my own street where people are, grabbing, they're with 4 or 5 people and they've got a bunch of beers. I walked out an hour ago to, get some air outside. And there are things I'm seeing where there's going to be a great divide the deeper this goes. So it is, it's really touch and go at the moment, in my view. I don't know, adding that.
Wow, thanks, Penelope. I think that's really important that we keep an eye on the neighbors, because a lot of times, especially in the US, when I was a kid, we knew all the neighbors and we were a little community. I would tear around the neighborhood with the other kids, and we'd be tearing around on our bikes and visiting each other's houses and having lunch in each other's houses. And when my kids grew up, about 20 years ago, I had 3 stepsons, and they really didn't hang out with the neighbors. Even though my youngest son's best friend lived next door, the 2 of them did not hang out together. And this is part of, I think, the rugged individualism of the US that really disturbs me. That when I moved into this neighborhood, I carried cookies around to the neighbors to introduce myself. But that just doesn't, that was 30 years ago. And that just doesn't happen anymore. I don't know who my neighbors are. I've tried to introduce myself a couple of times, but we live in this very, very insulated world where it's expected that that we'll keep to ourselves and we won't disturb anybody else. But what Penelope's talking about is a real danger, that there are kids, especially, who are in real danger and there's spousal abuse. We need to keep our eyes open because we are the ones who can help intervene if we see something untoward that we can intervene. So thanks, Penelope, for bringing that up. I think that's a really important.
It's a really important point, and I think that this is the beauty where any suffering that we've been through previously, and we've done the inner work through the work of Carl Gustav Jung and the other work that we've done in our lives, that we bring it together now, and that we have a purpose. This is the reason to that we're here to really solve some really deep issues. And for one, I am quite grateful as an evolutionary part astrologer that this what's going on has shown up in astrology with particular symbolism, which Carl Jung also looked at astrology. And I think that we can really begin to, there is something great going on at the same time that there's this, we're in trauma, there's a lot of goodness as much that's going to come out of this. For every bad thing, there's probably 1,000 good things right now, in my view, overall.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And Penelope's been telling me since last December that we were going to enter this terrible dark point because it hasn't been like this since when, 1519 or something like that?
It was 1518. The last what it is, and I won't bore people with the details, but it's called Pluto-Saturn conjunction, and it's in the sign of Capricorn. And the last time that occurred was in 1518 in that sign, the same symbolism. And that time was the Reformation, and where there was violence in the church. And I haven't dug too deep on the history of that, and then also the printing press had just come out around that time. And so information was being rolled out. So we could look at similar, that we've had YouTube and Facebook come out over the last, 20 odd years, so to speak. So there's similarities there in what's going on. And yes, Skip, when I was telling you this, I didn't quite expect this there.
No, I didn't expect it either. My goodness.
I want to add something here.
Yeah, sure.
So just like an hour back, I was a friend of mine who follow Krishna consciousness. He sent me one video where 2 years back, a 14-year-old Krishna consciousness devotee, a 14-year-old boy, and deep into a spirit, like scientifically studying astrology as in his home school, and he predicted all of this. I will share that link with you guys. He predicted all of this date-wise, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So it is it's there are few things which is truer than truth, and I think we are trying to tap into those territory. That is what the archetype feels to me,
Yes.
So another thing here, let's come back to the virus. So another thing which when you guys were talking, when Tim was talking about the neighborhood thing, it just came to my heart. My heart was like so full listening to that. So I'm a social worker, and from last 10 years I've been working for, so in India there's no adoption or foster care, things like that. Like whoever children who are under care and protection of government, they're sent to orphanage, and it's a jail kind of a setup just for kids with some flowers on the walls. Otherwise nothing is different. So I work for rehabilitation of those children, and at the age of 18, but there's a social economical rehabilitation aspect that I look after. And it's just so there's this one lady who was with that home, who came to one of the home which is like some 10 kilometers away from my place, and she passed away because of the coronavirus. So everybody here, like was panicked because she only came here to visit the shelter home, make a donation, and go back home. And she was like immediately like identified, and within 10 days she passed away. And no children here, like she stayed with them, but no children here were like tested positive. Like they all are quarantined from quite some time, so no symptoms came out as such. It's already been 20 days, more than 20 days, and it, for me it's like miracle story. Like it is a miracle story, because that woman, when she went back to Spain, she passed away in like 9 days time.
Wow.
And and I'm like sometime God have planned for few, and we just cannot, like, nothing, even coronavirus cannot defeat it. So so it was quite a, and those children have nobody. Even if they die, like, nobody will come to know,
Right.
apart from the case workers they have from the government. Like, they'll be just a number. And if that person forget to make a documentation, that number also won't be there.
Right.
So I'm just like I keep finding these stories, and I'm living on those stories. I'm living on all of you guys, and
Yeah.
and just God bless you all.
Yeah,
God
well,
bless
you're
you all.
certainly welcome here, Kushbu, and I hope you'll bring some more Indians to the to our future sessions. We're going to have an entire species with PTSD very soon. I mean, we're at only the beginning of the mental health issues that are going to emerge from this, and so we're going to be here to help one another and other people around the world. I just want to remark here just briefly that we've had several countries here. We've had the US, India, UK, Canada, and Singapore that I can count so far that have been on this Zoom session. And in the US, we've had people from California, Hawaii, Florida, North Carolina, Illinois, Nevada, Maryland, Montana, and the District of Columbia in this inaugural session. And I hope all of you will make people aware that we're going to be doing this 3 times a week for the foreseeable future. I had some problems with the technology getting this inaugural session going. I'm hopeful that I will be able to resolve that, and we'll be able to use the same links in the future. But please do watch for my announcements on YouTube about where the session is going to be, because I can't right now at this moment, I can't promise that it's going to be on the same link every time. But hopefully I'll get the future sessions scheduled in this afternoon and be able to predict that in the future. And I'm sorry for any inconvenience that it's brought anyone. We haven't heard from Jerome and Deborah Stevens. So Deborah, tell us what you're facing. You're in the District of Columbia, are you not, or or Maryland? Maybe she stepped away. Jerome, tell us what's going on in North Carolina.
Well, North Carolina has declared the 30-day cease and desist on everything except essential travel, and you can be fined if you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, supposedly, that they put in place. So you could cost you $1,000 to $1,500, or I don't know if they'll send you to jail, but that was the.
Well, that's cheap. In Maryland, the fine is $5,000.
Well, okay, we'll come down to North Carolina.
In the UK, it's £5,000, so we're doing well here too.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Boy. There's Joss. She's awake. Joss, do you want to? Oh, wait a minute. We have you on mute. Just a minute. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
I've been a butterfly on the wall, and I've been listening to you folks, and I just want to kind of like summarize my thoughts here. I think you guys are awesome, and this whole venue of connecting is very important in these unusual times. And Penelope, I was quite touched by your sharing of your experience with COVID-19. And I'm sure it gave you an opportunity for deep reflection. By the way, I'm here in Hawaii. Aloha, everyone. Aloha means love. And so I just want to express and spread my love to all of you. It's a different kind of virus. It's the love virus. And it's coming all the way from Honolulu, sunshine, Honolulu, Hawaii. And, you know, I've gone through more of a spiritual path now. Psychiatry is hard and some soft science. When I went to medical school, the emphasis, 75% of the emphasis is on pharmaceuticals, drugs. And now that I'm retired and gone on more of a spiritual path, I've developed more of an attitude of a holistic approach. And I'm finding that the spiritual side is actually far more important to go deeper into, because a lot of our problems stem from a spiritual level, an unconscious level, and it's into that collective unconscious that we're now seeing this COVID-19 event happening in this world. And it's not just in one spot, but all over the world. It's a call to love. And I'm sure in your, Penelope, in your moments in bed, it gave you an opportunity to have a deeper appreciation of life. And even for me, being isolated here in Hawaii, well, we're all isolating ourselves. It's given me some pause to do my life review. And I have a feeling that perhaps this is a call for everyone to do a life review and to appreciate the beauty and the little things that make our life wonderful, and that we can see miracles in just the simple things, simple as breathing. And it's interesting that this COVID attacks the lungs. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring these thoughts into the group here, that we're all going through an experience. It's not about good or bad, right or wrong. We're going through an experience in order to experience the contrast of pain and suffering and joy and appreciation and compassion. So it's all about finding meaning in life, but it's not meaning for everyone's life. It's a meaning for each and every one of us, our own personal meaning of life. So with that thought, thank you everyone for sharing. And I really, really appreciate you all.
Thank you so much, Joss. I really appreciate you being up at 5 a.m. for this.
Yeah, there was some technical, I was on waiting, and that's why I kind of joined in a little late, but I was there. I just didn't have my video on.
Yeah, I loved your love virus, and Marie has mentioned it on the chat here that we now have a name for this, the love virus.
Yeah, and this is a love fest, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Share and we bring it with our hearts, and you know, this conversation just flows because it's just coming right out from our heart.
Absolutely. So Deborah Bowman-Stevens, we didn't get to hear from you today. If you're there, say hello and tell
Well,
us what.
hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Okay, I'm not sure if my, I turned my video off because it doesn't seem to be working properly. So that's a very old picture of me with long hair there, you see. Long hair and a lot heavier. Anyway, I am actually in Maryland, not on the border of the District of Columbia. I am in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is the county in Maryland which has the most cases. I live in a seniors community and we have had one death. We do not know how many cases are here in our behind the fence with a gate community because our condo association hasn't shared that with us. I think it could be because they don't have the numbers themselves. We talked about last night about how a lot of cases are out there that were unknown originally and are still unknown. And we are hopefully in the United States are going to a system in the next few days where we can get instant results and test kits will be available because they've been in such short supply. A lot of people were not tested that could have been. And so making headway. But here in Maryland, I believe it's a $5,000 charge if you're out after the stay-at-home information that we got yesterday, and unless it's essential. I myself, for those of you who were not on our discussion last night, I've recently had knee replacement surgery and having some problems with it. And I also have an immune deficiency condition. So I'm in that category. Also, I'm above 65 years old. So I'm in that category that is looking at being in quarantine for as long as a year, which is very disturbing to me. But I'm so glad that I'm able to help with this group. I do have a background in psychology and hypnotherapy meditation. I'm also a writer, editor, and a publisher. So I have a lot of creative talents. I'm also a musician. From our young lad from Singapore there, I'm also a musician. So I'm here to help, and I'm going to try to be on as many meetings as possible. Today was a really rough day for me. I'm totally not walking again. Something happened in the middle of the night. I had a little tumble. So that's why you're seeing a picture of me today and not the real me.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're frightened. In my community, there is a woman who's very social. She happens to be a neighbor of mine. We are actually, and we talked about this before I learned about this video meeting yesterday. We talked about doing a video just within our community of a group of people who used to get together every Friday night at a place where they had bands. And of course, we haven't seen each other, and they haven't seen each other in a month or so. I haven't seen anybody in over 3 months now. But we're going to do this sort of thing just for friends who used to get together and can't and do it like this. So I'm going to help them with the Zoom and help them get them going. So I put that recommendation out there on a very positive, loving note. And again, thank you, Josh, for the love virus. That gives us such hope and is so meaningful. So thank you for that. But we're going to start doing little things like this within our community. And I guess my recommendation today is that for other people to think about that, to connect even in short groups, just to talk and just to get your feelings out and spread your love. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm so glad I was at least able to connect today.
Yeah, I was in a conference very much like this last Friday with John Jackson, who was here earlier, and two other Jungian analysts. And what they were definitely urging is that all of us try to reach out to 5 other people and just be regular check-ins for them. And certainly I would like to be a regular check-in for the new people we have here. Still, most of us, for Melanie and Kushbu, most of us are already members of our advanced reading group, and I'd be happy to give you, complimentary memberships if you write to skip.conover@gmail.com. I'll include you in the mailing list. We meet every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern time, so it'll be 12:30 your time, Melanie, and what 11 o'clock Kushbu's time, I think 11 p.m. Kushbu's time. But if you would like to join us, you're certainly welcome.
Sure.
And
Sure.
we try to we're trying to study deeply the work of C.G. Jung, and we've already done an entire seminar on Ion and on Mysterium Connectionis. We're now working our way through volume 15, which is the volume about creativity and the spirit. So we'd be happy to have you join us if you wish to. There are about 80 people that are in the mailing list for that, but we usually get about 10 or 11 people every week live, and the rest listen on playback. And we don't put those videos on YouTube. Those videos are only in our Dropbox, so you would need to have me add you to our Dropbox in order to participate. In addition to this, I'm continuing on with my readings. I've just completed The Bible and the Psyche by Edward Edinger, and I've started yesterday working with Spirit and Nature, which is volume 1 of the Eranos series, which Joseph Campbell edited. He edited 6 books this thick of the various lectures that the Eranos participants gave over the years. And if you want to know the story of Eranos, it's contained in this book, which is called Eranos, an Alternative Intellectual History of the 20th Century. And it's quite a remarkable story and book. So Tim and I will be hosting again in the future. If any of you, Jerome, are you a paying member of Zoom? Do you have a paid account?
Yes, I do.
Okay, could I add you to the hosts?
Yes.
The next time around? Is anybody else a paid member of Zoom? Because if you're,
I am, Skip. I'm a full paid member of Zoom also. So.
Okay, I'd like to add you as hosts against the possibility that I have technical difficulties here and I suddenly disappear.
Okay.
It won't blow out the session. If anybody else that's watching this video later, I would welcome you to volunteer to also host, so that we have others. That we had one occasion that Jerome was able to step up when I got knocked off the line one time. Maybe that won't happen so much in the next year, we'll see, but I need some others as backup.
Yeah, I can back up record, but we also, can you assign multiple hosts in this one session? Okay, because that way I could control some of the people that don't mute while you're you've got other things you were talking
Right.
about.
Yeah, that's the point. I need some help on those things.
Yeah, I just
And
want to be able to do that, and that can solve some of the noise problems while people are talking.
yeah, and there's always the risk that we'll have somebody who's a wild card that's messing up our session. So we sometimes need to knock people offline too. So Tim, do you want to say anything in closing? And just we'll do this again on Thursday at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern time, and I'll within the next day I'll hopefully get the technology worked out so we'll know where to go every time. But anyway,
Skip, this is Deborah.
Yeah.
This is Debbie. I also am a paying member because I use it for business under my business account. And I know you and I have, you have 2 emails from me, one personal and one business, and they kind of got mixed up this morning, but I also am a paying member as the company's CEO. So I also can help with that.
Okay, could you send me an email with the correct email address for that? Because I'll need that to add you as a host.
Right. I'm going to stay with the Google email because that's my paying account under my company name. So you and I'll get that all straightened out. Okay.
That's gmail.com, your gmail.com address.
Yeah, that's the gmail.com. Clasid Consultants Publishing at gmail.com. Yeah. So you and I'll get that worked out before Thursday.
Yeah, just send me an email so that I have it correct there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Tim, do you want to? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Marie, are you a member too?
Yes. No.
No. Okay.
I just want, before we end this session, I just wanna thank you, Skip and Tim, for organizing this love stream, especially also the people who joined this meeting, because it is important that we get together from different parts of the world, knowing what's happening, personally within them and within their community. So you're doing a great work, Skip. And
it's wonderful to be appreciated. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's not just this is like not just a public service, but a worldwide service. And I know in due time, you will have a hard time because this will be populated.
Yeah, well, I'm actually I'm actually very pleased that we've had so many people from so many countries already on this inaugural session. So
yeah, thanks, Marie, and thanks everybody. I have to say I wasn't expecting this to be as successful and as really touching as it has been. There's something about the magic of reaching around the world and being able to embrace people across the globe. This is a very unusual crisis in that we realize that we are all on the same ship and we're all dealing with the same thing. And to me, there is a huge community aspect to this that I find really, really valuable. And that's a gift of the virus. And I'll have to say, in some ways, I'm really grateful that we are having a crisis with that kind of magnitude. It brings us together in ways that we could not have dreamed of otherwise.
Absolutely.
Can I throw some symbolism in here from a perspective, because I do love Carl Jung and all the symbolism, and I came to mind, and I'm sure I'm not alone, but the corona, the sun and the sun, Christ consciousness. That's just a few words I want to put into the idea of no separation. that I think it's very valuable what we are being shown, that ultimately there is none. And the fact that money's gone out the window shows us quite beautifully somehow that we're developing something completely new now. We're building a complete new structure for humanity.
Yeah,
And
one thing I like to note is the physicist, famous popular physicist Michio Kaku says every atom in the universe is connected to every other atom in the universe. And I think it's important for us all to keep that kind of global perspective or universal perspective as we go forward. And I hope Khushbu and Melanie, especially since you're the newcomers here, and Joss, who's actually a newcomer to the group, that you'll continue to participate with us, and maybe tell some others that they would be welcome and can join us too. We're here to. The rest of us who've known each other for a little bit of time are anxious to offer a helpful balancing for our species, and if we can keep ourselves out of trouble, that will be a first. That will be an important thing. So thank you for being here. So
appreciate your service. It's just not service, it's love, I think it's love. So
yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you, Khushbu. It's wonderful to be appreciated.
I would like to just make one parting comment, and on something Tim said about rugged individualism. In many respects, we have to remember that that's actually a very positive thing, because it's the rugged individualism of Skip, putting himself out there to create his website and his YouTube channel. And we're talking on, I'm talking to you on a device created by Steve Jobs, who had created Apple. And we're talking on Zoom, which is another American inventor. And so these are examples of the rugged individualism gifting us. And in fact, we are probably talking on web servers that are owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, because Amazon Web Services is the largest owner of the cloud. So somehow what we have to do is dial in to the correct balance of socialism and rugged individualism. So thanks, guys.
Well, and democracy too. I mean, I'm not going to give up on democracy. Socialism gets a really bad name, but the reality is we have socialized police force, socialized fire department, socialized military. So many things are socialized in our country, and what isn't socialized definitely is healthcare, because we actually have monopolies around the country where the big healthcare insurers have divided up the country basically, and they operate monopolies in their own areas. And so we do need at least a choice of going to something like Medicare if we're under the age, just to compete with those guys and keep the costs down, because they're the ones that have pushed the prices for healthcare in the United States way up. And in this part of the country, we have United Healthcare. In California, it's Kaiser Permanente, and there are others that have divided up the country. And we have to recognize that they're not socialized, and they're not even competing. They're not competing. They are socialized because they're not competing. They're monopolies in their areas, and we need to find a way to fix that. But anyway, thank you all for being here today. I'm going to call this meeting to a close today, And I'll be back in touch, and especially Melanie and Kushbu, please do come back and connect with us more. We'd be happy to see you and
Sure.
have you a part of our community, and keep checking in. We have to keep our mental health here, and if we can't keep our mental health, God knows how the rest of the country will do it.
Yeah.
And Melanie, you might want to be in contact with Tim, because he's had, even in the last 3 weeks, he's had a very significant numinous experience that you might find interesting to talk with him about.
Yeah, I'd enjoy that, Melanie.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so feel free to contact him, and any of us actually, but Tim in particular, and we'll see you on Thursday, I hope. So,
thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
I am going to be back online. I'm reading The Spirit of Psychology at the second segment of it at 4:30 this afternoon. But anyway, I'll see you then.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you.
Aloha.
Take
Thank you again,
Take
Skip.
care.
Thanks, Tim.
Take
Bye,
care,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.